Okay, so this is a general video. It's to establish the type of endgame that I was talking about in the previous video, and I don't know. In the other group that I was posting in, I'm not 100% sure that it'll be approved because I don't post a lot in there, and I'd like to increase the potential that I can get posts approved quickly or automatically. I don't know, but anyway, so this is going to be a general video that I post on maybe even my my home feed, and this is a game that at the time it was played in the World Open this year. I think I explained in my last video that when I came into it, I was going to try to play in the Open if my rating didn't go below 2,000, and it did go below 2,000, but not enough time. So I played in the Open, and this was against a master. I believe his USCF rating is around 2250. His FIDE rating, I think, is, if I remember correctly, like 2100 or 2180 or something. I could look it up, but it's not really that big a deal what the rating is. The important thing is the factors of this endgame, which is the judgment in which he went into the endgame was correct. So if we go back, let's see. Let's say to here. There was an obvious advantage in this middle game where there was a lot of stuff that he was, doing to my center. Like, there's a pin here. I can't take the pawn without damaging a lot of stuff, and if I move my queen to like this side of the board, then he can push the pawn. So there's a lot of stuff that he's doing that indicates that he has an advantage that he can trade down to an advantageous endgame. And I don't know without computer analysis if it's correct to exchange down here. I mean, I can flip on the engine real quick. You guys can see it, and you can see if there is an advantage here, which according to the engine right now, it's basically just a white's advantage that they get in the opening. And my move apparently was correct, and I think the assessment is just a little bit different than mine. I felt that at this point that I was in a bad endgame, and I felt like he could have done better, and maybe made me feel worse overall. But if you look at the computer and how it's looking with a depth of 21, which is actually pretty high, and maintains a 0.5 advantage, that's basically what white has in the opening. So what that's saying is that overall, if you're honest with yourself, the game is roughly equal. But white or black never, let's say if you made an assessment, black never obtained the equality that he wants in the middle game, and we're almost to the end game. So I played queen to g5, and we'll turn off the engine because I don't care. I played queen g5, and he took with the assumption that the endgame that comes from that will give him a winning advantage. Now, at this point, I agreed with him that he had an advantage. I did not agree with him that it was a winning advantage. There's a lot to be said about that. When people assess their own positions in light of trying to prove that you're cooler than the other player, there's a lot of people out there that will make this generalized mistake saying that they're either winning or losing in a position, and that's not really true. There's a wide range of whether or not you're winning or losing, and anything in between that people ignore because they either think it's boring or they don't think it's important. And masters do it too, and this is an example. I mean, this is a ranked master, and he kind of proved in a way that while he did win this endgame, he didn't really know more than, let's say, a super A-class player. And when we went to the analysis room, we were going over this for a good 30 minutes, and it actually proved that I knew more about the endgame, even though I lost off a technicality, and I'll show you that later. It just proved the knowledge gap that some people may think they have but actually don't, or that they don't have or may actually do have. So this is he traded the knight, and I wanted to try to keep my pawn structure intact, but I knew going into this exchange that he was going to take the exchange to try to damage my pawn structure where it's permanently damaged that way. So now, at this point, he thought that, he thought that he was just simply winning a pawn because there's no way that I could bring this rook into the game in any way. But I surprised him with this move. I'm not sure how he missed it. I mean, maybe it's the same reason that I miss stuff. But he thought that he could immediately come down and just rampage my queenside. And when he looked at my move, he was surprised and maybe, I don't know, maybe a little embarrassed that he missed it. But he did admit that he missed it overall. Now he did attack that way. And he did try to focus his attempts on this, on the pawn. And what I'm going to say is that when people say that most rook endgames are drawn, that's very much true. And even this one, when it comes down to it, even this one, if played correctly, it's probably a draw. But sometimes you can get into positions where the position's winning. And not only did I get into a position that's winning, but he actually got it. I blundered into a loss, and I kind of want to show that. So I played rook e7, and you can argue that these moves are by force, but when it comes down to theory, unless you can get this king activated like up to here, you don't want an inactive rook. You want an active rook. So my rook would have been happier placed here on e2 at a given point, and try to equally pester white's pawns. But considering the fact that this game is the way it is, I may not have liked having my rook placed on e7 so much as maybe having my king defend e7 so that the rook is more free. I'm sorry, not e7, but defend e6 so that the rook is more free to activate. And technically my king did make it over there, but at this point, the feeling that white had an advantage at this point was probably correct. The computer still thinks it's approximately equal, which I didn't think so. I thought white had a pretty pressing advantage at this point when I was playing the game, but doesn't really matter. I don't like looking at computers very often, so if I flip one on and then flip it off, that's basically my hate for computers. Okay, so king f2, king g6. Now, this is actually following a rule. When you're in an endgame, you want to bring the king closer to the middle of the board. And another rule is, which I think he followed a little bit more than I did, which is the attacking side wants to keep the pawns back, and the defending side, the attacking side wants to push the pawns forward to attack, and the defending side wants to keep the pawns going back. Now, his king isn't really in an attacking position, so he may not want the pawns to advance yet, but if the king gets, in this general area, then he wants to start pushing his pawns and start attacking. If I can get my king in this general area, then I can start pushing pawns. But considering my pawn structure, I may not want to push pawns in a full advancing yet, because being that his pawns are better placed than mine are, I usually want to break so that I'm breaking up the actual structure instead of trying to attack. One example might be pushing g4 to break up these things here. And I think I had the opportunity to do that at some point, but I screwed it up. So here, and I thought this was great. So I don't know 100% whether or not this is the best way to go, but I did show this to one of my trainers who's an FM, and he didn't really like the way white was playing, but he also didn't think that white was 100% winning. So we kind of agreed on a lot of the stuff. Just maybe he had felt that white could have done a little better. And that's the way that I felt. So b5 probably may not be doing much, but it does focus on the fact that the pawn is pinned, and I don't believe that white can pass up the pawn. And I'm not saying that the pawn can pass. Like, I don't think that this pawn will lose if he passes it up. What I do think, though, is that if the pawn passes, black can get at least a draw. So what happened is when he played c5, I played b4, and I offered the draw, which my trainer, again, he said that that's probably accurate. He felt that white may have made a mistake by playing c5, and might even be coming close to losing at this point. So he played here, and then I believed that I had at least an equal game here. My trainer one of my trainers that was doing this at the time, he believed that that was a blunder, and that I might be even winning here. And I wasn't sure, but the analysis that I did in my head was that the king can come here, win the pawn, and then I can consolidate my position by playing a5, and then my rook and stuff can like defend laterally this pawn over here, and then my king can still defend this pawn and this pawn. So I believe that it was equalish. Now, this being the fact that my king is actually in a good spot, like in my areas that I said that I needed to be. If my king wasn't here, then this would probably be winning. Now, the analysis afterwards, he stated that he thought that this couldn't be taken when he pushed it, and was surprised when I went king to d5, rook d2, king takes, and just outright won the pawn. Now, at this point, I thought that I had a drawish position, but I believe the computer and my trainer thinks that it's my favor now. So yeah, it believes it's my favor. So this is the start of the, I guess you can call it, endgame debate, where who knows if it's 100% winning. I mean, you could get opinions by masters all you want, but you know, the debate would still have to come down to whether or not the person that's playing it can win it. And at the time that I played this, I couldn't produce a draw or a win. So I guess this would be somewhat of my learning experience. Now, according to my trainer, up until around this point, I'm not going to tell you exactly where yet, but up to around this point, I played a pretty good endgame, and I agreed with that. So we get to, you know, basic stuff here, and my trainer starts saying that he thinks I have a win here, because for one thing, I'm up a pawn, and now white isn't really doing anything anymore. If the rook can get a little more active, then what is going to happen? He even thinks that, you know, pawn takes and pawn takes would win. Now, here's where practice and knowledge can conflict. At the board, I assumed that everything wins, because I've got a pawn. It's passed. I forgot my head and forgot that I need to worry about the pawn that's on b4 actually, and the relative value of where his king is. And the funny thing is that when I did this, my trainer thought that this was a winning endgame, and we laughed about it and said that I did the only move that lost. And you know, if you flip on the computer again, basically pretty much everything at least draws. And we kept battling through some of the variations, especially you know, especially a little bit later. And then a little bit later, there was a spot where I could have actually did do something where I would be winning, and it involved pushing the pawn here. So go forward a little bit. So this is the mistake, is that we all agree that it wasn't accurate to play rook takes b4, because with the rooks gone, the king can come over and try to gobble up the pawn. Now, in the analysis that I have, that we did, about half of the time I drew, and about half the time he won. But somewhere in the middle there, like maybe 5 to 10%, I won. And that's actually not too bad. In this line, everything was equal, and there was a lot of times where I won the battle based on the idea that if I could play b3 and g4, then I'd be in a winning position. And a lot of it is based on the fact that the pawn on b3 makes it further up the board, that the king has to capture that pawn, and gives it more time to advance my d pawn down the board. Now, I don't know a lot about how learning experiences will do online like this, but maybe showing you the endgame and then maybe sparking a little bit of a debate about this endgame might be enough. So I will leave it open to how you guys would like to try to debate, you know, this opening. I mean, I'm not focusing this on any group or anything. This is just basically people who might enjoy my posts. And I'm going to be posting this to several groups. And, you know, you can debate about this endgame all you like. You can disagree with my analysis all you want. I've pretty much put all of my analysis in that I should. I've studied this endgame with, I believe I have a Grandmaster analysis on this. I do have an IM and an FM who both talked about this position, and they generally agree with most of my comments. But you can still disagree with anything that you would like. Somebody who's stronger in the end game than my trainers, by all means, you feel free to comment, and I'm open to any kind of debate. The actual game was here, and I believe the losing mistake is actually here with G6. And the reason that G6 was an actual losing mistake was maybe a little technical, but I believe I could have gotten out of a lot of stuff by advancing the pawn to G4 here. The reason why is it gives me more room to move my king in to take those pawns and kind of offset this one. Because no matter what, he's going to get this pawn. I think there's also another line where I don't exactly have to push G4, but I can push, B3. And it kind of gives me something, at least drawish type. I think because I'm not 100% sure on the specifics. But you know what? If I get into specifics, it could make this video too long. And I don't really want to make the video much longer than a half an hour. The last video was a whole hour, and the only reason that I didn't mind that was because it actually had pretty decent analysis in it. But I kind of wanted to just show a loss. This was a loss, and and I wanted to bring up a position in which not only did a master not understand 100%, but I didn't understand 100%, and people with the experience in endgames, they understood the technicalities in this, and they could explain it to me, and it proved that I didn't do as bad as maybe that I thought. And this was a World Open Games. I had some wins against masters, and I basically performed a little higher than what my high rating established. Like, I think my performance was somewhere in the 2100s or something. But yeah, so this is the position that I lost. I can show you the rest of the moves. To be honest, one of the rules in which I forgot that I probably shouldn't have is you kind of want to there's pawn blocking ideas like this here. This tied up my whole system. There's something called a pawn freeze in Silman's book. There's Capablanca's law, which is you want to try to advance pawns in such a way that they hinder the development of the pawns that have counterparts. So he's pushing this pawn to its maximum to hinder my pawns in this way. And if I were to try to go in this direction to try to take them all, then he can back it up, still take this pawn, and still have enough time to come back and protect while pushing this pawn down the board. So maybe if the king at this point was on d3 instead, I would have more of a chance of keeping the game under control. So he went ahead and did that. I played b3 here, hoping that it would give me enough time to go in this direction and then push the pawn this way. And at this time I was actually really tired. This was round 9, so it was the last round in the World Open, and I pretty much the entire tournament was playing Masters. So you can probably imagine that somebody of my caliber, you know, playing mostly Masters in a tournament with 9 rounds could get tired. I think one game I played a C-class player, but for the most part, every single person in this list was, you know, a ranked master. I believe I had 3 wins out of all 9. And maybe it was 2 wins and 1 draw. I don't remember right now. But this is one of my important losses that you could say I may have learned the most on, and I think it was my only real true endgame. And I hope you guys like this. I'm going to stop this right about at 30 minutes. It looks like a little over 25. And let me know what you think. Yeah. Oh, since I haven't hit the 30 mark here, take a look. So I didn't think that I could catch this pawn and then come back to protect these pawns successfully. So I went in this direction to try to go like this, but I knew by this point here that I was losing. I thought back here I might have had a chance, but when I went here and he went here, I went and looked at the position a little bit more, and I realized at that point that I was losing. And I believe I resigned about here. No sense in just going all the way. So that was the end of the game. Hope you enjoyed it.